Welcome to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We are so excited to have you joining us on this journey where we explore different ways to empower your soul, whether it's healing in your kitchen or all the way up in the corporate world. Come with us as we look into different ways to heal your mind, body, and soul. Hey everyone, it's Catherine Cristani with another episode of Willow Healing Matters, and today I am joined by Dr. Joseph Rosado, MD. So he's a global advocate for plant-based medicine, so I'm really excited to interview him today. He is trained as an emergency medical technician, a paramedic, and a catheterization laboratory technician while working his way through college. A major car accident led Dr. Rosado to chiropractic, and at 35 he entered medical school, becoming a top student while a husband and father. There he studied marijuana and determined it provided natural health and wellness benefits without side effects. Dr. Rosado worked throughout the Latin American Diaspora, setting up a clinic in Costa Rica. In Florida, Dr. Rosado quickly rose to the top of the public health community as a physician, clinic, and hospital director. In 2014, Dr. Rosado led in the frontlines of Florida's push for medical marijuana. One of the state's first doctors advocating for medical cannabis, in 2016, Dr. Rosado had the distinction of being the first Central Florida physician to recommend medical marijuana for an adult patient, as well as the first to recommend it for a patient under the age of 18. He has worked with thousands of patients, from toddlers to the elderly, recommending medical cannabis and managing treatment. He has received numerous awards and continues to add to his many certifications. The proud father of twin daughters and grandfather of 4, Dr. Rosado currently resides in Central Florida, but today he is joining me where I'm in Australia. So a big welcome to the show, Dr. Joe.
Thank you. And correction, I am now the grandfather of 5 children.
Woo, congratulations.
Yes, on October 1st, my 5th grandchild was born, my 2nd grandson.
Amazing. How amazing is that? I always feel that when I get to grandparent stage, it's the fun stage, because my parents keep telling me you can just give them back.
And that is no lie.
Oh, I love it. So I'm very excited to talk to you about so my background is a speech language pathologist, and I had a lot of children who on my caseload at one point who were going through epilepsy and seizures, and and there was all these studies that I was saying, hey, have a look at using marijuana and using that to help, from the medical point of view, with helping with reduced seizures. And it was amazing how much red tape they had to get through just to get this. They could get these other drugs and pharmaceutical drugs that were meant to help but doing nothing apart from shutting their liver down completely, which is really disheartening when you're working with a 4-year-old. But at the same time, it amazes me how a plant can be so, I can't think of the word, but put on such a scary pedestal. And
Villainized is the word I like to use.
Thank you. So what led you to realizing that marijuana has all these other potential health benefits and, getting it legalized and that sort of thing?
Well, more than one of my medical school professors and attending physicians have used the following term to describe me, and that is a cockroach. The reason being because I will dig into every nook and cranny to get information. And the word in Spanish is cucarachero, meaning you are cockroach-like. So it's not like I'm a real cockroach, I'm just cockroach-like in my behavior. And so I am an atypical medical student / now physician. And that is that I learned about the endocannabinoid system and the cannabis in medical school. Less than 10% of medical schools in the United States educate their students on the endocannabinoid system or cannabis proper. Now, I've used that term twice, so let me explain it to your listeners and viewers. What it is. The endocannabinoid system is a system that all vertebrates have. We all produce cannabis. So dogs, cats, giraffes, gorillas, and all humans have a vertebral column. We are vertebrates. Therefore, we all have an endocannabinoid system and we all produce cannabis. We have receptors in our bodies where these chemicals that we create work on and work in. And so that is the basis of this medicine. So when you read a basic biology book or a basic anatomy and physiology book, you'll read about the respiratory system, the cardiovascular system, the gastrointestinal system, the reproductive system, but nothing about the endocannabinoid system, which is found in every organ system in our body, because every organ system has cannabinoid receptors in them. So truly, the
Interesting.
system that controls our body is the endocannabinoid system, because it's what regulates and maintains what's called homeostasis, or in plain English, balance. So that being said, I learned about this system in the toxicology portion of the pharmacology class. And as per usual, they start with what's called the gateway drug, which is cannabis. Oh, let's start with marijuana and then work our way to the hard drugs. And so, me being me, I said, well, aren't we going to talk about alcohol? Just because it's legal does not make it any less of a drug. It does not make it any less addictive. And then I said, how about nicotine? Are we going to talk about nicotine too? And so my professor was already, but we did speak about the endocannabinoid system. We did speak about the receptors, but then that's where it began, it ended. And then immediately it went into their, monologue of, it is a gateway drug and it's going to lead to further abuse and problems, blah, 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 whatever. Anyway, that evening when I got back home, I pulled out my textbook. And in the textbook, I looked up cannabis sativa, which is the actual name for the plant. And so I went in and I read on it and learned more about the endocannabinoid system, learned a little bit more about the receptors. Now, this was in the late 90s. The first endocannabinoid was discovered and named in 1992. So we're talking about, and then 1996, in the United States, California, the state of California, decriminalized cannabis for medical use, medical purposes. And in the latter portion of the 90s, Washington State, Oregon, and other states joined and followed suit with California. So this is still early on in the whole process, but there was enough information in this textbook for me to understand that it was going to be another tool in my toolbox eventually as I managed and worked with patients. So fast forward to 2010, when it becomes medically legal in the state of Arizona, one of my best friends reaches out to me and says, I have property. I'm wanting to get involved in the medical cannabis space. They just decriminalized it in the state of Arizona, but I need a medical doctor to be my medical director. I said, sign me up. And so we progressed to move in that direction. Fortunately, it did not pan out. And so I had to wait an additional 4 years. And in February of 2014, as you read in the intro, when the individual that was sponsoring the bill and was moving in the direction to decriminalize it, I sent him an email stating, I'm a physician, I'm an advocate, how do I get involved? 24 hours later, I was speaking with the campaign manager. A week later, I was on the Bureau of Speakers. Being that I am bilingual, bicultural, meaning Spanish, English, it opened up all kinds of opportunities for me. And I was doing a lot of traveling to the south portion of the state of Florida. I reside and practice medicine in the state of Florida. I was traveling to the southern portion of the state, where it is a predominantly Hispanic population. And a lot of the major Spanish networks are in that region. And so I would travel down there. This is before COVID, so Zoom was not something that was commonplace. And so I had to drive my happy behind down to South Florida. Now we have a bullet train of sorts. It's called a Brightline. No, I don't get any money from them, but we can get down from Central Florida, Orlando, which is the largest city from where I live.
Or where Disney World is. That's how yes.
And 3.5, 4 hours later, I'm in Miami and I don't have to drive. I don't have to deal with the
Well,
traffic.
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's very convenient, and you can get pretty decent deals and so forth. So anyway, but yeah, so that's how I got involved. That was the beginning of it. And then it progressed until eventually in 2014, the law did not pass, but they had a law in the books for what's called low THC, which means high CBD which is non-euphoric. And if, for example, if cannabis were an American cowboy movie, CBD would be the cowboy dressed in white, and THC would be the cowboy dressed in black. Because just like I use the word villainize cannabis, they want to villainize THC because it causes you to be high. It makes you high. It has the potential. But you know what else has the potential to make you high? Opiates. And those are still prescribed for pain. You know what else can make you high? An amphetamine. But you know what? It's still prescribed to children to control their ADD and ADHD. So don't talk to me about, oh, that medicine's going to make you high. What else makes you high? A benzodiazepine that's prescribed like candy to manage and treat anxiety. But none of those patients that get a prescription ask their doctor, am I going to be high? Am I going to be able to manage and drive? Would I be able to manage or work with heavy machinery where I work? They don't ask that. But God forbid, I tell a parent, you need to give your child this medicine so that they don't have 200 to 300 seizures a day. And I get, are they going to be high? Or somebody has cancer and is already on mega dosages of a narcotic, of an opiate, and they'll look at me and say, am I going to be able to drive? And then I'll ask them, well, do you drive while you're on the opiates? And they're like, yeah. I said, so what's the difference?
It amazes me. Hey, like I had a client come in and he was going like with autism spectrum disorder, like level 3, right? So you can imagine the cocktail of drugs he was also on because he was very behavioral and everything like that. And anyway, they just diagnosed him with ADHD. And I said, well, and mum, like they were from an Asian background, and I said, why don't you go ask your Chinese herbalist for some Korean ginseng? And they're like, what do you mean? I said, well, there's all these studies that have been shown that help people with ADHD. If you take Korean ginseng, it helps balance it out. And I said, I don't think he needs something else in his system, personally. But, but at the same time, she was like, oh, but doesn't that make ginseng make you like really active? I'm like, no, like there's all these studies being done. And she's like, oh, I'll think about it. And then the next day I had another client come in with epilepsy and everything. And then they thought he had ADHD, which makes sense because his brain's constantly active. And then I said the same thing. And the mum's like, oh, I'll think about it. I'm going to trial all the other drugs first, but then not even try the plant medicine. And then that day when I got home, this is just the universe and I laugh, I got home and this meme popped up and it said, happy to take a drug with a list of prescriptive, like just with, counter...
Side effects, adverse effects.
Thank you. Yes. But try a natural plant medicine, we're going to ask all the questions.
Exactly. And now, like when I first started doing this 9 years ago, I would take the time and try to educate them. But the more I did that, the more I realized something that one of my first bosses had told me. And that was, the man, against his will, he's of the same opinion still. And so they'll come in, they want the cannabis because they read somewhere or they saw it on CNN or they saw Sanjay Gupta talking about it or they saw videos of this little girl, Charlotte Fiji, or something triggered, or they read one of my interviews or they saw one of my podcasts, whatever. However they got to my office, they got to my office. And once they are there, then I get, we play 20 questions. Well, is my child going to get high? And I can appreciate the question of drug-drug interactions because that's a valid concern, but with any medicine. And
Yes.
I address that, obviously, because we want to avoid any harm to the individual. But when you start to question whether, it's safe or it's this or it's that, and now I'll hear them. And then when they're finished, I'll look them dead in the face and say, you've asked me a bunch of questions. May I ask you one? And they're like, sure, absolutely. I said, when your pediatrician or your family doctor gave your child or gave you, and I read off all the medications that they're taking that cause dependence and or addiction or have amazing side effects, that when you were given all of these prescription medications, did you spend this much time asking them all of the side effects, all of the adverse effects, drug-drug interactions, If it was going to make you high, if it was going to make you incapacitated, did you spend that time to ask them that? And they're like, well, no. I'm like, well, why not? And they're like, well, that's medicine. I said, well, what the hell is this? I'm still a doctor. You cannot get this without my permission in this state. This isn't an adult use state where you can walk into an adult use dispensary and buy whatever you choose to buy, or you have somebody behind the counter giving you advice on what to use, what to buy. This isn't that. This is medicine. I'm a physician. I'm a recommending physician. I haven't traveled the world. I haven't written 7 books on this topic just for you to come in and treat me like I'm some second-class citizen. I'm still your physician. I'm still your child's physician, and we're going to work that way. Then all of a sudden, and because I'm originally from the northeastern part of the United States, a city called New York, that we are known for being a little bold, and I'm from a specific borough called the Bronx, that is the only borough that has the word "the" in front of it. That's how special we think we are. And so that being said, and I use that as a joke. It's like, well, remember, I'm from the Bronx, and you're not going to walk away from this conversation wondering what I meant. You're going to know exactly what I meant. So now, as I've gained more experience in listening, and I'm hearing the same, you hear the same questions over and over again. After a while, it's like, okay, I've got to come up with a different approach, because pounding my head against the wall was not conducive to my personal health, my mental health, because it became a chore. And I didn't get into medicine. I did not choose to become a medical cannabis physician to make it a chore. If I'm not having fun, nobody's having fun, and it's time to reevaluate.
100%. And the question that keeps popping in my head, only because I've thought this for years, why do you think marijuana was so villainized?
Oh, very easy. I got the answer.
Very easy.
Okay, so before I give you that answer, I'm going to ask you a question. Were you aware, or did you know, that in the mid-1800s, cannabis was part of the United States pharmacopoeia, and physicians were writing prescriptions for the use of cannabis for pain, for nausea, for vomiting, for insomnia? Did you know that?
I didn't, but I feel I know where this is going. Continue.
So it was part of this country's what's called pharmacopoeia. It was part of our formulary. Fast forward to the late 1900s, the 1930s, specifically 1937, an individual by the name of Harry Aislinger. Huh? No. This was Harry Aislinger. He was the first drug czar in the United States, and he had a specific issue with cannabis, particularly the industrialized portion of cannabis, hemp, where it can be used for textiles, clothing, ropes, paper, etc. And they were looking at how much money the paper industry could gain, or the cement industry, or the steel industry, or all these different industries in and around the United States that were run by very, very wealthy individuals. And as a result of that, they passed the Marijuana Tax Act, that anything that was cannabis related was taxed at an extremely high rate. Not only that, he also found some producers, a director, and a scriptwriter, and came up with the movie Reefer Madness. And on the trailer, or in the trailer, it mentioned that it was a drug that was going to make our white women crazy, because if they smoked it, they were going to have sex with, are you ready? Are you ready for this? With darkies,
bracing myself.
With darkies, with jazz singers, and with Mexicans. Now, I can think of worse people to have sex with, none of which are any of those individuals who were mentioned. So the thing was that movie came out in the late 1930s. I went to high school in 1976. And in 1977, 40 years later, I was shown that movie in my freshman year of high school. And multiple schoolmates of mine that went to that same high school, an all-male Catholic high school in the Bronx by the name of Cardinal Hayes High School, to this day, well, not to this day, but years ago, when I first got involved in the cannabis space, so about 11 years ago, I was having a conversation with two guys that went to that same high school that are here in Florida. And, we're golfing buddies. We hang out. We go out to dinner, etc. And one of them looked at me and said, "Don't you remember our freshman year at Cardinal Hayes that we watched Reefer Madness?" And I'm like, "Yeah, and that came out in 1937. And he's like, "Yeah, so?" And I said, "Okay. So when did you go to medical school? Or when did you graduate from medical school?" And he told me the year he graduated from medical school. And I said, "Okay." And it is now 2014, 2015. Yeah. Are you practicing medicine the way you learned to practice medicine when you were in medical school X amount of years ago? And he's like, "Well, of course not." I'm like, "Well, why not?" He said, "Well, things have evolved, things have changed." I'm like, and so from 1937, you're going to promote and preach something that was, created. It was created with this sense of racism, this sense of attack. And so that was how and when it became villainized. Fast forward to 1970, we had a president by the name of Richard Nixon who had issues with certain members of different races. And he then, 1970, created the Controlled Substance Act, where they made cannabis what is called a Schedule 1 drug. A Schedule 1 drug is defined as a highly addictive drug with no medicinal value. But there's a Schedule 3, just like there's a Schedule 2, a Schedule 4, and a Schedule 5. Schedule 2 is where your narcotics, your opiates are located, and your amphetamines. Schedule 3 are medications like testosterone, buprenorphine for medication-assisted therapy for individuals that have opiate use disorder well, in that Schedule 3 are two synthetic cannabis medications. One is called dronabinol, and the other is called nabiximol, which is sesamet or marinol. Those are synthetic versions of THC made in a lab, do not come from the plant. But that's a Schedule 3, which means that I, as a physician, can tell my medical assistant, call the pharmacy and call this order in for this patient, and she or he can call the pharmacy, give the patient's information, give them my numbers, my DEA number, Drug Enforcement Agency number, my National Provider Identification number, my license number, my office phone number, tell them the prescription for this synthetic version, and within 90 minutes, the patient has it in their pocket. But a Schedule 1, I cannot prescribe, because if I say I'm prescribing a Schedule 1 drug, I would lose my medical license and my DEA license. In 2018, we had a product that came from the hemp plant, a medication that started in the UK. W Pharmaceuticals is the parent company, and the medication is called Epidiolex, which is a CBD isolate, just CBD, nothing else, and oil, approved for initially 2 conditions, now 3. The 2 conditions are Lennox-Gastaut and Dravet syndrome, which are intractable seizures in children, and the third is tuberous sclerosis. 3 conditions, 1 medication. That came in as a Schedule 5, which is the most innocuous, least offensive. In there, you can also get Tylenol number 3 or Tylenol number 4, which is acetaminophen and codeine. Low addiction, highly medical. Okay, so now we have a Schedule 5 CBD isolate that comes from the hemp plant, a Schedule 3, which is your synthetic versions of THC, and a Schedule 1, which is cannabis in its natural state. Guess what else is a Schedule 1? Heroin, peyote, ayahuasca, psilocybin, LSD, MDMA, ecstasy. Those are also Schedule 1 drugs. But guess what? In the majority of our universities in the United States, they are studying LSD for PTSD and depression. They're studying psilocybin for PTSD, and they're studying MDMA for PTSD and treatment-resistant depression or depression. They're even using or have approved, the FDA has approved what we have known to be a horse tranquilizer and later a party drug from the 90s known as ketamine for post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, suicidal ideations, and treatment-resistant depression. That is also a Schedule 3 medication. Studies have been done utilizing every one of those medications. There is a federal patent in the. Oh no, I can go on for days.
I know, but it's so interesting that it's like you're sharing that history of why cannabis became the villain. But it's always, I just feel like a lot of the time you just have to follow the dollars, and you have to follow, who gets that benefit out of that, because it's so. I remember years ago there's this chef, Pete Evans, in Australia. He's very controversial, but at the same time he came out and he said, I rather my kids have marijuana than alcohol because it does less damage to the body. And he got crucified in the media for it and everything like that. And I was like, actually, when you look into the side effects, it kind of makes sense, exactly what he says. And like you originally brought up at the start, that you brought up with your toxology professor, like, hey, what about alcohol and what about nicotine? Because a lot of people don't realize just because you stop drinking whatever, it takes 6 months for alcohol to get fully out of your system. And then that's even before your liver starts to recover. So
it's interesting that you bring that up, because when my twin daughters were teenagers, they were living with me from the age of 13 till about 17, which explains the gray hairs. But I told them the same thing. I would rather you use cannabis than alcohol or cigarettes, by far. And I explained to them, and now we still were not doing anything in the state of Florida. It was just from the basic knowledge that I had from, medical school, what I studied on my own, then revisiting the topic in 2010. Funny story, however, when I traveled to where they live. They live in the northern central part of the United States, a state called Ohio. One lives on the Ohio side, one lives on the Indiana side, but they're like border states. And the state of Ohio has an adult use cannabis program, and the state of Indiana has no medical program whatsoever. No cannabis program. So no medical, no adult use. Ohio has medical and adult use both. So I'm in Ohio, and whenever I go up there, I have a roommate, and that is my first grandson. He's my roomie. I get up there, my daughter packs a bag, and he's with me pretty much the entire time. I've grown an additional appendage. Anyway, at that time, he had issues with insomnia. He had a really hard time sleeping. And so his mom, on my direction, was giving him melatonin. Now I've discovered, and the research is showing that melatonin is not really the best thing to use, but because for years it was a supplement and it was approved and it was cool. Now I would say, no, don't do that. But anyway, so my grandson was taking melatonin, very low dose. Well, my daughter had forgotten to pack his melatonin. And so, like, when he went to get his stuff, he's like, oh crap, Grandpa, I don't have my melatonin. I said, well, let me call your mom. So I called his mom, and I'm like, hey, baby, you forgot to pack the melatonin. She's like, oh, shit. And she's like, well, do you want me to drive drive there, or do you guys want to drive here? I'm like, look, you're, 25, 30 minutes away. That makes no sense. I said, I'll just give him one of my, I said, how do you give him the melatonin? And she's like, oh, in an edible, in a gummy. I said, okay. I said, I'll just give him one of my gummies. Are you ready for this? My freaking daughter, the woman, one of the women that I brought to this world says, is that safe, Dad? I paused. I did not reply. And the moment that she heard nothing coming out of my mouth, she quickly realized that she had really stuck her foot way, way deep in her mouth. And then she's like, I think I may have gone too far, Dad. And I said, you think? I said, you are questioning the same individual that when you were 14, 15, 16, told you that I would rather you use this than alcohol or cigarettes. Your son, my grandchild, is in my room under my direct supervision, and you're going to question me whether I can give him one of my edibles? Are you kidding me? And so she's like, do what you will, Dad. Like, thank you. So we hang up. And so I turn to my grandson. I'm like, okay, buddy, your mom's not going to bring you melatonin. I'll just give you one of mine. And he's like, well, what's the dose on yours, Grandpa? Because mine is 3 grams. And I'm like, 3 grams? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, are you sure it's not 3 milligrams? And he's like, oh, yeah, no, you're right. 3 milligrams. I'm like, okay. I said, don't worry about it because mine is 100. And he's like, oh my God, Grandpa, you're going to kill me. I said, well, I am a doctor. So if you were to die, I think I could bring you back to life. And so he paused and he's like, yeah, you're right. You are a doctor, so I'll trust you. This is the same kid this is the same kid, he's 11 now, at the time he was 10, that doesn't matter what I tell him, Siri, my grandpa said this. What do you say?
God.
So he didn't ask Siri. So I cut the dose even like an eighth of what I normally recommend. And so I cut it it comes in a square. I cut the square in half. I cut that half in half. And then I cut that half in half. So it was like literally 1/8 of a dose. And so I gave it to him. He was playing video games. I'm like, I'm going to go and take a shower. I'll come out and, just keep playing your game. You're fine. I go in, take my shower. I come out of the shower. TV's off. Lights are off. He's laying in bed. I'm like, Cam, what's going on, buddy? I'm like, are you sleeping? He's like, no, I'm resting my eyes. And I'm like, you're resting your eyes? Your eyes are closed. Yeah, that's how I rest my eyes, with my eyes closed. I'm like, okay. Like, are you sleepy? No, I'm okay. I'm like, okay, buddy. Well, I'm going to go to sleep because, I'm kind of old and I need my rest. And he's like, okay, Grandpa, go to bed. He's snoring before my head hits the pillow. Next morning, we wake up. I usually get up about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning because that's just me. And so I do my morning routine. I come out and he's waking up. It's about 7:30 and he's like, Grandpa. I'm like, yeah, buddy. He's like, where are we going to go for breakfast? I'm like, why? He's like, I don't know why, but I'm kind of hungry. He got the munchies. I'm like, yeah. And it was his birthday. And I said, let's go get you some breakfast. And so, of course, his breakfast was, donuts at one of his favorite local donut places. But I share that story with you and your audience because my child, my DNA, a person that can receive my blood because she and I and her sister share my blood type, questioned me if it was safe for me to give her son, my grandson, this medicine. Somebody that's grown by my side, that has read my books, has heard me lecture, has been to my seminars. If this is this individual, imagine somebody that I see that doesn't know me from Adam. That's why I do these podcasts. That's why I've written the books. That's why I lecture, to get this message out, because if my own blood, my own flesh and blood questioned it, who else is not going to question it,
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And I really appreciated your story because it was just, thank you. Thank you for putting it in the human perspective. And also, it's funny because I don't even know, so many episodes ago, I actually interviewed a sleep expert and she was talking about melatonin and how it's not a good thing too. So everyone, if they've listened to that before this, they'll be like, oh yeah, there's another person talking about it. It's just coincidences, which I love. So I feel like we could talk all day, Dr. Joe, but I need to ask, if you could heal or change something in the world, what would it be?
The misperception that cannabis is a gateway drug. There is a professor in the northwestern portion, or the western portion of Canada, northwestern portion of the United States, right on the border, is British Columbia. And he was the first to have coined the phrase that cannabis is an exit drug, not a gateway drug. It is an exit from addiction. It is an exit from dependence. There's another doctor on the northeastern portion of the United States, Dr. Uma. She's in Massachusetts. She has trademarked that phrase that cannabis is is an exit drug. I say it truly, when somebody says, yeah, cannabis is a gateway drug, I'm like, yeah, it's a gateway to a better quality of life, because now you're no longer dependent, you're no longer addicted, you're no longer using medications where the side effects are far worse than the actual condition that you're treating. So when I sign my books and when I finish any interview or podcast, I always end and sign this way: hashtag cannabis is medicine. So that's what I would love to change, is that demystify, debunk, be a myth buster to the fallacy that cannabis is not medicine.
I love that so much. And if people want to find your books, Dr. Joe, connect with you, learn more about cannabis, where can they find you?
Okay, so the easiest way to find me is my website, which is josephrosadomd.com. Now, if you were to go to my website right now, and the day and time of this is, we're in early November of 2025. And at this point in time, for you is November 6th, 2025, because you're in Australia and I'm in Florida and you're ahead of me. Yeah, we're back to the future. But that being said, right now my website is in a bit of a shambles because I had another team managing that website, josephrosadomd.com, and I was creating, and I'm in the midst of creating an AI. It's called Dr. Joe 2.0, where it's Dr. Joe 2.0, where I'm going to be utilizing artificial intelligence for patients, healthcare professionals, to demystify the idea and the concept of, oh my God, AI is going to, replace the physician, or is going to replace, the healthcare provider or mental health provider. And so to demystify it and educate people, I created that. Well, because my original website is a mess, everything is being channeled to that drjoe2.0.com website. So eventually it'll be two separate, but right now it's one, so don't get freaked out. As far as my books, just go to Amazon. All my books are on Amazon. Just type in Joseph Rosado, MD, and cannabis, or medical cannabis, and you'll see everything. My first book that was published in 2019, and then the 6 other books that came after that.
I'll make sure to have all those notes in there, and by the time this episode's aired, I'm sure the websites will be merged, so I'll make sure to have the most
your mouth to God's ears
information. I will pray over your website, Dr. Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights, but also your wisdom, and for finding the truth in all the mysticism, right? Because, we get fed so much information, and sometimes you have to really, like you said, be like a cockroach and go into the depths to actually get the truth. And to find something that works so well in a medical format that has originally just had that stigma around it rather than embracing it.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for the invitation, Catherine. And I look forward to meeting and speaking with you in the future about another component or aspect of cannabis, or mental health or behavioral health, because after COVID, our world as a whole has yet to recover from that.
Yes, that is a whole other, I feel, show and as well. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We have so much love and gratitude that you have taken the time out of your day to empower you on your healing journey. The views shared by the person being interviewed might not necessarily reflect that of the host and should be used at your own discernment. Trust what resonates for you and follow your heart and soul guidance. If you have any underlying medical conditions or mental health issues, please consult with your healthcare provider before pursuing any of the recommendations. Likewise, you can always contact the person being interviewed to find out more information. This can be found in the show notes. Remember to activate, align, heal, empower, and find love in everything that you do.